we're trying to think of some fun ways to open up this call, and we've only got 30 minutes. But so instead of going around the room and having everybody share it, I thought it'd be fun for everybody to jump in the chat and just like drop in your LinkedIn, so we can be connecting with one another on LinkedIn, but also drop in the show that you're binging on Netflix right now. So we're always looking for Netflix shows. So drop in your LinkedIn and your Netflix binge, your current Netflix binge. And
I'm hooked on Outlander.
Outlander.
Oh my God.
We just started
Amazing.
Waco last night, my wife and I. And it's the guy from one of the characters from Friday Night Lights. And I'm super into it. I didn't really know that story that well. All right, I think we're all in. All right. So Logan and I are really excited about this topic. This was, for those that weren't on the call a few minutes ago, Sharon Torek, who's here, suggested this topic. And this is something that Logan and I are both really passionate about. And so we were really excited to see this question come in because we could talk about this stuff for days and days. But I don't know how many of you have read my book, Content-Based Networking, but the whole premise is that relationships are going to win, and podcasting is a way to reverse engineer relationships with the exact people you want to know. There you go, Eric. So we've thought a lot about how do you leverage podcasting to build these very strategic relationships, but then what do you do on the back end of interviewing someone and being a journalist and highlighting and really shining your spotlight as the host of the podcast on them? What do you do after that? And so what we're going to have this conversation about is really post interview. What can you do to maintain and continue to build quality relationships with the people that you're featuring on your show? And so I'll kick it off with these first couple, and then Logan's going to chime in as well. If any, just to prevent too much chaos, if somebody's got, like, if we say something and somebody's got something that they want to add, Logan, there's like a hand raise thing in here somewhere, isn't it?
For some reason, I'm not seeing the raise hands option right now
either.
If you go to participants, click on that, and then on the right hand side, you have invite, mute me, or raise hand as a choice.
Oh, there we go. I always forget, and I think it's in the chat, but it's in the participants. So
well, they're moving things around recently with all the security changes.
Yeah. Okay, so raise your hand in Zoom, and Logan and I will call you out. Logan, if you could keep your eye on that when I'm talking, I'll keep my eye on it when you're talking. But the first thing, and this is something that probably in the last 6 months we've really started to dive deep on. The first thing that Logan and I want to talk about is when you're talking about nurturing relationships, the best thing we found is doing another content collaboration. And I know that can sound like, oh man, like we just went through all this work to do the first one. Now I got to do another one. But there's something magical about interacting with somebody a second time. We've just noticed that your relational equity deepens significantly on the second collaboration. So we've all met somebody one time at a conference, or somebody's introed you one time, and talking to somebody one time. Yeah, I don't know what the stats are, but we've all met probably a gajillion people one time. The number of people that we've interacted with twice or more, probably much lower. So I think that probably has a lot to do with why this is so effective. We started doing this on a series on B2B growth called 5 Things. So with Logan will interview somebody. If he had a really good connection, if he thinks, man, this is a really solid opportunity for us. They talked about maybe wanting to get into podcasting in the next 6 months. So he'll invite them back to do this 5 Thing series. And on 5 Things, it doesn't have anything to do with B2B marketing, which is what our show is about. It has to do with what are the 5 things this particular guest couldn't live without. And the way we framed it on the show is like, hey, you're going to be hearing from really smart marketers on what's making them tick and what are really helpful resources that these marketers are using. So our listeners of the show really like the series. I really like the series because it's fresh content and it's different than what's normally in the feed, but it also acts as a relational gateway for Logan to deepen relationships with people that he's had on his show in the past. So that 5 thing series has been really cool, both just from a diversification of our content, but also relationship deepening. You can also do this with maybe like a blog article, or if you wanted to do like a video series on LinkedIn where you get them back on and say, hey, I'm talking about, remote work, something super relevant right now, doing a series on LinkedIn, going back to some of your previous guests that you think, man, there could be some opportunity for us to work together down the line. Reach out, ask them to be a part of the remote work series that you're doing on LinkedIn. Different things like that. There's all kinds of, obviously it doesn't have to be another podcast interview. It can be lots of other types of content collaborations, but that's what we're doing. And I would strongly suggest all of you at least thinking about doing something like it, because it's been super helpful for us. Logan, did I miss anything there? Any benefit that you've seen from doing the 5 thing series that I did touch on?
Yeah, that example, just real quick, I even built into my booking form for that one for them to list their 5 things. And to give you guys a little bit more context, like 5 things you can't live without in work or in life. And so some people have been like my Peloton or this app on my phone, or they go my dog or my spouse or something. It's really kind of run the gamut. But when they fill those in, now I have those as well. And like when I go back and I'm exchanging an email with this person. Oh yeah, they talked about their dog and their dog's name was Milo or whatever. And so it brings up some different conversational pieces. We're going to actually, that's kind of a segue into the next thing.
I want to call out Katerina. She raised her hand real quick. What were your thoughts?
Cool. I love the idea, guys. I was wondering in regards to timing, how long should we leave between having the podcast episode with them and then engaging with them again to do something like that?
That's a great question.
Say like 3 months, 6 months, a year?
Yeah. What have you been doing, Logan?
It's been all over the place. It's kind of been, when I've thought about it, like, hey, I haven't talked to them in a while and we had a great conversation, or they told me, podcasting might be on their radar, Q4. And instead of just going right back and saying, hey, are you guys ready to talk business now? Hey, let's do a content collaboration. And usually I've done that and then they're like, yeah, let's do that. And let's also pick up the sales conversation maybe, or something like that. And so really it's been more based on when do I want to reach out? And now I have a way to add some value, make it fun, as opposed to reach out just based on, business or the need or timing.
That's a great question, Katerina. Thanks for sharing that. This next one that I want to talk about. So a second content collaboration being number 1. The second one is this app that I recently found in the last, I think, 2 or 3 months. And the app is called Fabriq, Fabriq. And it's essentially like, and you guys might already be doing this with your CRM, but Fabriq is basically like a CRM for your personal network. And it's really cool because you can add somebody in there, and then you can put, like, it's got spots to add in like their hobbies, their kids' names, their wedding anniversary. And naturally, some of these things might come up during the interview. Maybe it comes up during your second collaboration. As you're getting to know these people more, you can store that information in Fabriq. And what I love most about the app is you put in there how often you want to stay in touch with them. So I've got my inner circle in Fabriq that I want to stay in touch with every week. So, people like Logan, my wife, my best friend, Timmy, that's my inner circle. Then you have your middle circle and your outer circle and your extended circle. And you can put in there, hey, I want to be reminded to reach out to this person every few weeks, every month, every few months. And the app will actually push names to you. So if you're like, hey, you just interviewed somebody and you're like, man, I want to make sure that I'm staying connected with them a few months from now. There are obviously lots of ways to do that with your CRM and with, different follow-up reminders that you can set in your inbox. But I've found that putting them into Fabriq and then just saying, hey, I want to keep in touch with this person every few months, the app makes sure that it pushes them to the surface for me. It also has like a little like green to red bar on your relationship. So all of the headshots of the people that you want to stay connected with are in the app, and it's almost like a fuel tank. So I can go into the app and I can look kind of at a glance at all of my personal network that I want to stay connected with. And I'm like, oh, Mac's at a red right now. So I'll shoot Mac text, and then I'll hit that I connected with him, and it refills his tank. So really cool app. It's actually something that I wanted to build years ago called Love People Better. And we just never ended up pulling the trigger. These guys did what I wanted to do. So I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, but definitely check out that. This next one is something I want Logan to talk about a little bit. And we've talked to Sharon actually about this idea, but I wanted to share it with all of you. And it's a really fun take and a different take on sending a thank you note. I think sending a thank you note post-interview I always think that's a great idea. My wife loves sending thank you notes, but this idea is just a little bit different of a twist on the thank you note. Logan, you want to share what you've been doing with coloring pages?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something we're working on actually rolling out for Sharon's show. We were talking about it, and we're in the process now that we recently rebranded on B2B Growth to do this. And, there are even additional services out there to, have thank you note with their episode number or different things like that. And I can't remember what I was listening to, but this idea came to me one night. What if we sent a coloring sheet, literally like something you would color in with a box of crayons like we were kids, as something to the guest with a sticky note on it. And it was purposefully kind of low production because we've all seen things that we've received that are like semi-personalized, and they're like getting the semi-personalized email, right? So here's an example. Timmy on our team actually mocked this up for us for B2B Growth. We haven't gone forward with using this yet, but literally a one sheet white piece of paper that's black and white, sending this to them, maybe a quote from their episode, but have their episode number, title, the show logo, maybe their headshot or maybe not. There's a couple different ways you could customize here. And putting a sticky note on it, for so when you need to de-stress, color this in. Again, great conversation on the podcast.
Something to give to your kids during your next Zoom call to get them to shut up, or, something fun and cheeky that you can put on the Post-it note to go along with it. That's custom to them. So Logan had this idea a few weeks ago, and I thought it was brilliant. And Timmy got it mocked up for us pretty quickly. I'm really excited to start using that. So that's our third idea. The fourth one is around texting. Now, when I talk about texting, I'm not referring to like the platform. I know there's a lot of platforms that allow B2B companies to text kind of en masse. I'm just talking about like the texting that you do with your friends and with your spouse. If you're using Calendly, I know that you can set up Calendly to where they put in their phone number and it automatically sends them like text reminders. But by them putting that information in, you can actually take it and send them a personal text from your phone that says like, "Hey, Ethan, really excited about our interview coming up in a couple hours. If you have any questions, leading up to it, I'm just a text away," or something like that. Setting that standard of like being able to communicate with them via text around the podcast episode itself just creates way more connection between you and the guest. And honestly, I think it makes them even a little bit more comfortable with you going into the interview. So it could probably lower some tension if they've never done a podcast interview before, just like having a casual stream of communication with you leading up to the interview. But then after the interview, texting them and saying, "Hey, you did a fantastic job." But then following up on that, and this can be where Fabriq comes in too. If you heard them talking about their dog, or if they had to tell their dog to be quiet, or you heard them mention their dog's name, like noting that down and then texting them either the next day or a few days later, just saying like, "Hey, hope Sparky is doing well," or something fun like that. That expedites friendship really quickly, I found. Logan, anything else you've been doing around texting?
A couple of things I wanted to mention here. It kind of all ties into, Fabriq kind of collecting little bits of personal information, being thoughtful with that, texting being a good medium for that. Part of a way to tie this together is actually something that came from an interview Ethan did on the Customer Experience podcast with Vanessa Van Edwards in how you can start conversations better, as opposed to asking, what do you do? You ask, are you working on any exciting projects lately? And working in some creative questions to open things up and get people more comfortable and talkative pre-interview, and then using that to, fuel that follow-up conversation. Like, what's your tolerance for pineapple on pizza? My wife and I were just debating that, and we come down on either sides. Hey, our team recently did a poll on Coke or Pepsi, and we're pretty well divided. Those sorts of things. Have you picked up any new hobbies since we've been in quarantine life? Those sorts of things. So think about those as well to kind of fuel the conversation there.
Katerina, what are your thoughts here?
Sorry, me again.
No, you're fine. I love it.
I just wanted to see if someone is in a similar situation to me, because I'm not the host of the podcast, but I do the whole heavy lifting, let's say. So I reach out to the guests, and then often I build a stronger relationship with the guest than actually my CEO or our VP of sales who co-host the show. So I wonder if anyone else is in a similar situation, and how you could maybe give me some tips around how to make sure they carry on the relationship.
Yeah. Anyone have any thoughts there? I'm looking around and I see a lot of hosts. I don't see a lot of folks that are in your spot, Katerina.
I mean, my only thought on it, and to your point, James, I'm not in that situation. I would wonder, what is the motivation for the show, and what is specifically the motivation for each of the co-hosts? If it's for them to be familiar with your brand, or if it's for you to produce content, then maybe you're fine as is. If it is to do this more content-based networking approach to growing the business, then you certainly need to engage both of them in some kind of a follow-up plan. And so maybe you're their intermediary, akin to, some of the software that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah. It's just because, like, obviously the podcast is an excuse to get in touch with these people who are ultimately our potential clients. But we never take the conversation on a sales side, because we want to keep it as a soft touch. And we want to wait for them to come back to us. So I never know if it's right to pitch them at some point, or if we just need to use that as a nurture tactic, really.
What are your thoughts on that, Logan?
Yeah, I would say that even you building the relationship with them, Kat, is still valuable, because, James and I have been talking a lot about, from a content perspective, more members of the Sweetfish team putting out content as individuals, because it doesn't matter. If someone knows Dan, who's newer to our team, or knows James, or knows me, we're creating brand awareness for Sweetfish through the individuals. And so I would say, if you have the time for it, you have the propensity for it, you already have some interaction with them, you're taking some of these things on, and maybe Ray doing one or two of them is still going to add some value. That's my thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. All right. This next one is connecting with them on social. So I think the no-brainer here is LinkedIn, obviously. But Logan's actually done some really cool things within Sales Nav, and then also with Twitter lists. So I'll let you run with this one, Logan.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys will all make the decision, are my guests, more active on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We see more, obviously, selling to B2B marketers on LinkedIn, but I still see a lot of them are fairly active on Twitter, or they'll share their Twitter handle, at the end of the show, something like that. One thing I've noticed on Twitter, a lot of people don't use, at least I don't hear them talking about it, is lists. So you can create a public or a private list. And so oftentimes previous guests, I will add them to my marketing list. Now, I probably should have renamed it and said like marketers to follow or something like that. Because the idea is, hey, here's a touch here and I'm featuring you again. Like, hey, we just had a conversation and it was worthwhile to have you on my, marketers to follow list. Now you can also add them to private lists. Maybe they are a potential customer, or maybe, they're a potential customer in this segment, so that you could go to Twitter, look at that specific list and not just everyone that you follow, and make it easier to engage with their content. So those are two ways to use Twitter lists, both publicly and privately. And then also, if any of you, I know a lot of people here aren't kind of sales and marketing under one hat like I am, but something for either your sales team or you is to add them as a lead or add them to a list in LinkedIn Sales Navigator if you're using Sales Navigator, because that, different than just connecting with them on LinkedIn, does give you some ways to look at when do they post content to make sure that I see it, or they have a job change or something like that. There's just a little bit more control over some of those notifications. So it might make it easier to be able to go in and engage with their content. There's some troubles I have with LinkedIn Sales Navigator that we won't get into here, but a couple of tactical ideas.
And then Facebook and Instagram, I've just found to be really cool, just connecting with people where they share more personal, like the more personal side of their life. So following it's really like, it's just fun to, especially if you've gotten their phone number and you've set a precedent of texting them pre and post interview. You see them post something about on Instagram. I think this is actually Eric on this call. Like, I think I found out that he was moving, or I found out about it, their new house, or saw something on Instagram that made me go, oh, I'm going to text Eric about that. We ended up having a great conversation. So just being able to be tuned in to where they're at. And I know that a lot of people are like, do I connect with people, add someone as a friend on Facebook? I found that, like, if I've had an interaction with somebody and it's been a positive interaction, and they request to be my friend on Facebook, I'm going to say yes. Now, I'm a millennial, and so I'm not everybody, but I've had really good success with being able to follow the folks that we've had on the show and friend them on Facebook, and then follow them on Instagram. So those are two other ones that we wanted to touch on there. This sixth one, I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on this one, but it's connecting them to another guest that maybe lives in their area or is in their industry. So depending on what type of show you're doing, what your focus is on the show, asking the guest, like, hey, who are you trying to build relationships with? Where are you trying to grow your network? And because you're doing the show, you're naturally going to be connected to a lot of different people. Now, they might say like, hey, I'm looking for other, tech entrepreneurs in San Francisco. That might not be the makeup of all of your guests, but you probably interviewed, 2 or 3 of them in the past. Connecting them there after the interview is a great way. And it's a great way for you to intro them in a very kind way that shines a spotlight on them. So doing like a thoughtful introduction and not just saying like, Bob, meet Frank, but hey, Bob, I just interviewed Frank on our podcast. He had a ton of incredible insight around, X, Y, and Z. Thought this would be a really fun connection for you two. I'll let you two take it from here. Something like that is just, I think, a big win in terms of like the relational bank account from Stephen Covey. Like, it's a very much a deposit in your relational bank account with that guest if you do something like that. So we wanted to make sure that we mentioned that one. The seventh one, this is something we've had a lot of fun with. So I don't know if you all have read the book Giftology by John Ruhlin, but we had John on our podcast. He was probably in one of the first couple hundred episodes. I mean, he was an early guest years ago. And his principle of giftology is that you want to send gifts to people that are about them. So often we send gifts that have our logo on it. I've got one on my desk now that is I've got a couple different gifts on my desk that, because they're about me, I actually keep them on my desk and I see them all the time. So I'll show you one example that all of you could do with your shows. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's this little cardboard, like I don't even know what to call it. What's it say? Wink. I can't read what the tag says on the back of this because it's bunched up, but it's like, it's this little three-dimensional thing that I can sit on my desk. And it's a quote that I said on Samantha Stone's podcast. So it's got her podcast logo right here, and then it's got my name right there, and then the quote from the episode there. And I literally leave this on, it sits on my desk all day, every day, and I see it every day. That's the kind of impact that sending a gift that's about them, as opposed to just sending your swag, can have. And so we've done this we've experimented with this with new customers, where we'll send them a painting where it's their face next to almost like the Mount Rushmore of hosts. So it's like a custom drawing of their face next to Oprah, Ellen, and Jimmy Fallon. And so we've experimented with stuff like that. We've done starter jackets. So for the first B2B growth guest that was on our show 3 times, she mentioned I had done a dinner in Boston, and she had mentioned something about like she never played sports, so she never got to wear a starter jacket, or whatever you get, Letterman jacket. I think that's not starter jacket, Letterman jacket. And so we went and we had a Letterman jacket made. It was like the B2B growth logo, and then it had like the cover of her book on the sleeve and her company logo. Like I think maybe her company logo was on the chest, and then we had B2B growth right here. And then on the other sleeve, it was her show's logo. And then we had her episode numbers like listed out on the sleeve. She talks about that all the time, and shares that story often. She's also one of like our biggest referral partners. So she's been a customer of ours in the past. She sends us a lot of referrals. So doing thoughtful things like that can have long lasting impact, and it just makes business a whole lot more fun. So we've done water bottles. I think I know Ethan got one of those when we were sending those a while back that had his podcast logo on it. So again, it was about him, not about us. You can do like custom wine glasses. My wife actually does these with Kelsey from our team, and you can just like key in on something they said, like, oh, I'm really getting into Tiger King, or my wife and I just started binging, Game of Thrones. And you can go on and find like on Etsy personalized like wine glasses or custom wine glasses with Game of Thrones painted on there. And so that can be like a fun little touch point where you're sending something to them like that. Anything else that I've missed, Logan? We did a bobblehead one time. And it ended up on the back of Stu Heineck's book. So Stu Heineck is an author, and he's been one of our customers, and this is a second book called Get the Meeting, and he sent it to me because he featured me in the book. He also wrote a book called How to Get a Meeting with Anyone that's fantastic, and that's when we first interviewed him, was when I was interviewing him about that book. I turned to the back of this and I was like, oh my gosh, we sent him this bobblehead. This was a bobblehead for him. So you can get those made. I think it's only like a few $100. So you might not want to do that for every guest. Eric, you've done a really cool, can you tell us what you did with the superheroes?
So that was a specific campaign, but yeah, when we were targeting for higher education, C-level presidents, where a contract with a college or university can be worth 7 figures for us. So it was easier us for a cost per acquisition standpoint. But yeah, we sent pictures, profile photos, and side photos to a custom modeling place, and we created a James superhero, or in this case it was a President Armstrong and a President Lewis superhero costume, where we branded them as Higher Ed Hero, and it came in a Higher Ed box that we branded for them. And so that was great when we were trying to do the big over the top one. James, one that you pointed me in the right direction to was Alyce.com, ALYCE.com, where you give them their email address, and I find out that James likes Disney and his wife is a marine biologist and things like that, things that I didn't know based on my couple of interactions with them. And so if you're trying to figure out what are those gifts that are going to be more valuable to them than you, Alyce.com is an easy, quick win to find that information.
Great one. Great plug there. Awesome. So I know we're right up at our time. I'll share these last 3 pretty quick. So featuring them in a roundup post. So doing some sort of like a long form blog post where maybe you've had 5 or 6 guests all talk about a certain element of customer experience or higher education or whatever the theme for your show is. They've touched on similar things, rounding up a blog post. And maybe you're a contributor for HubSpot's blog or Salesforce's blog, or using that as your guest contributor content, doing roundups on past episodes, and then reaching out to them saying, hey, I featured you in this post that I just wrote in this guest blog. You can also do it as a slide deck on LinkedIn. If you go to my profile and look at my post from Monday, you'll see the slide deck that we did on LinkedIn. It was about a guy that we had featured on the show named Chris Walker, and we just highlighted some of the really good content that he's been sharing. So that's another way to stay in touch with folks. And then this 9th one, inviting them to a private community. We have tried doing this, start and stop. We've not been able to stay consistent with it. Just the size of our team, we don't have quite enough bandwidth on our team to give it to somebody and really let them own it. But like doing a Slack channel for all of your guests from your show, doing a LinkedIn engagement group, maybe just a message thread on LinkedIn where you're gathering everybody that you've had on your show in the past, or Facebook group. We've tried the Slack group and we've tried the Facebook group. And both of them, it seemed like there was a lot of receptivity to it. People wanted to be a part of it. We just on our end failed in staying consistent, because you've got to do things like, you've got to keep the conversation going. So question of the day, stuff like that. I think if you had somebody on your team that could really own it, that would be a really great play. And then the 10th one is referencing them in a future episode and going back and letting them know that you did that. This is something Logan does really, really well, where he'll be talking to someone and he'll say, man, we were talking to Todd in an episode of, a few episodes ago about this same idea. Well, he tracks like, oh, I did that. I'm going to make sure and let Todd know that I mentioned him in this episode, as just a soft touch. Eric, what are your thoughts there?
I stumbled into that very recently. We had a product lead from Amazon on the show recently who referenced a university that we'd worked with. So I name dropped the past guest. He raved about her. I got to connect them again afterwards. She had just gotten a new job as president of a university in Colorado, which is a great new partner for us. And it was a great way to have my second meeting with her.
Yes.
So I serendipity fell into it, but being more strategic about it, I think is a great idea.
I love it. Awesome. Logan, do you want to drop these links? We did a blog post a while back that has a lot more of these ideas that we want to share in here. Just so you guys have access to all of this. We'll share the recording. I think I forgot to hit record on this, Logan, but we should have it from Chorus, right?
Yes. Sorry, I'm struggling for the mute button.
So we'll send you the link to this call, and then we'll also make sure in that email to include this relationship marketing blog post that we wrote, and then the link to this coloring page mockup, so you guys can see that as well. Thank you. I know we went 5 minutes over here, so sorry for taking up more of your time. But again, this is a topic that we can go on for a really long time. So thank you all so much for jumping on, and I'm excited to do this again next month.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Lovely meeting you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Greetings from the UK.
Yes.
Thanks, Kat.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.